In today's video, I am going to be talking about the four things, the four elements that you need to consider when you are planning an overland run. What is an overland run? Let's take a look at the first word, overlanding. So I quickly did a Google search. Overlanding is self-reliant travel to a remote destination where the journey is the principal goal. So that is overlanding. So overlanding is mainly done with 4x4s and that sort of thing, where the guys will camp out immediately where they stop. Now, I am going to be doing an overland run. So I am going to have to be self-reliant to get from point A to point B. So what am I going to be considering when I in planning this run? Number one, distance. Number two, terrain. Number three, fuel. And number four, conditions on the day. Distance that you are going to be covering. So if you are training or if you are planning to cover a 21 kilometer distance, your training plan is going to look slightly different to if you are going to cover a 50 kilometer or a greater distance. So you are going to have different elements to your training plan for longer distances than shorter distances. You've got to train to cover that distance on your overlanding adventure. Number two, what sort of terrain are you going to be running on? Are you going to be running on a tar surface, which is nice and smooth, a normal road run? Or are you going to be running on soft sand? Are you going dunes? Are you going to be running on gravel? Are you going to be doing trail runs? That sort of thing. So you need to consider your terrain as well. Your gear is going to look slightly different depending on the terrain that you're going to be running on. So if it's going to be a trail run with rough terrain, your shoes are going to have to be different to if you are going to be doing a road run. Then I would also suggest looking at the profile of the distance that you are going to be covering. So that also helps with planning the pacing that you are going to be pacing strategy that you're going to be following. So are you going to be climbing like the Comrades up run, or are you going to be going downhill or down run like the Comrades down run? That will help you to think of the sort of training that you need to be doing during your training plan. If you don't have a profile of the terrain that or the distance that you're going to be covering, then you're going to need to add an additional step, and that's what I'm going to be doing in August. I'm going to be cycling the distance that I'm going to be covering on a mountain bike. That will allow me to gather some valuable data. I geek out on data and numbers and profiles and graphs and that sort of thing. And that will add to the planning that I am, or to the training that I am going to be doing for this adventure that I am going to be running. Number three, how are you going to ensure that you've got adequate fuel in your body? Are you going to be carrying your energy bars and your Energade or your Powerade, your energy drinks for electrolytes and that sort of thing? Are you going to be carrying that on a backpack? Are you going to be carrying a camel pack? Or are you going to have planned stops along the way with friends or family supporting you along the way? For me, I would typically, in the true definition of overlanding, you have got to be self-reliant. So for me, the goal is to have a camel pack on my back, and my fuel, my energy bars, my liquids, a fruit or something like that, just to keep things, to keep my system going on my back. That's the goal. I don't know if it's going to work out like that, but that is something to consider as well. And number 4, you have got to consider the conditions on the day of your run, on the day of your adventure. Is it warm? Is it cold? Is it windy? Is it humid? What are the conditions? Because that is ultimately going to impact your performance. You will have to maybe rethink your pacing strategy a little bit. Say for instance, if it's a warm day, your heart rate is going to be naturally going to be higher than if it's a colder day. So with a higher heart rate, you're naturally going to have to reduce your pace in order to make sure that you're running in the correct zones, in order to make sure that you are not burning up all of the fuel that you've got in your body, or all of the energy that you've got in your body. So that is also something to consider. Another thing to consider on the day is your starting time. That is important because you don't want to be running in the desert or in very hot conditions at 10 o'clock or at 11 o'clock in the morning still. Things are going to get a lot more difficult, a lot more tough, because your body is going to be having to deal with heat, dehydration maybe if you haven't had a stop, or if you've run out of your fuel. And so for me, the plan is to start as early as possible. I want to start at 4. So the earlier the better. The earlier you run in the dark, the more time you have, or the less time you have running in those heat, very warm, hot conditions. So thank you for watching to the end. In today's video, I just quickly ran through the 4 elements, the 4 things that you have got to consider when you are planning an overland run. Overlanding, you've got to be self-reliant. You are traveling overland from one place to another, and the journey is the main principle or the main goal of the run. The 4 elements is you've got to consider the distance that you are going to be covering. You've got to consider the terrain that you are going to be running on. You've got to consider fuel. Are you going to have someone that supports you along the way, or are you going to be carrying it on your back? And then last, you've got to consider the conditions on the day, because that, if it's hot, if it's cold, that's going to be impacting your pacing strategy for your overland run. I hope you found this video valuable, interesting, overland running. If you like this content, push the like button please. And also, if you are a runner that likes to go on adventures, please subscribe. Please do consider subscribing. Catch you in the next video.